Everyone knows your name. For some, you are the greatest military genius in human history. For others, an evil horn who nearly destroyed Great Rome. Right now, you stand on a snowy alpine pass. An icy wind knocks you off your feet. Your army is exhausted from a long march, and ahead lies the most powerful and disciplined state of the ancient world. The Roman senators are certain that these mountains will be your grave. They laugh at your plan, considering it pure madness, but they are wrong. You are Hannibal Barca, and you do not simply lead soldiers into battle. You are going to rewrite world history. To understand how you ended up here on the brink of the abyss, challenging an invincible empire, we must go back to the very beginning, to the day when your entire life was predetermined by a single oath. Crisis does not always begin on the battlefield with the clash of swords. Your first, gravest crisis falls upon you in the absolute silence of a vast temple in Carthage. You are only 9 years old. The air is thick with incense, but you feel only the overwhelming weight of the moment. Your father, the distinguished general Hannibal Barca, looks down on you. Carthage has just lost the First Punic War. Your father was not defeated in fair combat. He was betrayed by politicians who agreed to a humiliating, ruinous peace with Rome. Hamilcar cannot forgive this betrayal. And now his ambitions, his wounded pride, and his cold hatred of the Romans become your direct legacy. He leads you to the stone altar of the supreme deity. His heavy hand falls on your shoulder. Swear. His voice echoes through the high vaults. Swear that until your last breath you will be an implacable enemy of Rome. You are only a child, but at this moment you utter words that forever deprive you of the right to a normal, peaceful life. This oath becomes your invisible compass. You no longer belong to yourself. You are your father's project, a delayed action weapon that Carthage is preparing for a global revenge. From this day on, your carefree childhood ends. Hamilcar takes you to Spain, far from the intrigues of the Carthaginian Senate. There, in the wild, turbulent lands, he begins to build a new empire, an economic and military springboard for the coming war. You grew up not in luxurious palaces, but in the Spartan conditions of military camps. You study complex tactics, diplomacy, the languages of the Iberian tribes, and the art of mass control. You watch as your father methodically, year after year, builds an army that will soon be unrivaled anywhere in the world. But this fragile balance collapses when your father suddenly dies. Overnight, you're left alone with his colossal legacy. Power formally passes to your son-in-law Hasdrubal, but tens of thousands of veterans are already looking to you, Duca. They see you as a young leader who will sooner or later take his place. Tensions mount with each passing year. Roman spies closely monitor the Barcid family's growing power. Then you realize a new war is only a matter of time. The clockwork of history has already been set in motion, and it cannot be stopped. Crisis strikes you suddenly, like a dagger in the back. And it happens literally. In 220 BC, an assassin kills your son-in-law Hasdrubal right in his tent. At that moment, a political vacuum threatens to tear apart everything your family has built over decades. The Spanish army, composed of dozens of different tribes and mercenaries, is about to descend into chaos. If they sense weakness, the Barcid Empire will collapse in days. At 26 years old, you bear the colossal responsibility for the fate of an entire people. You have no right to mourn. You go out to your troops, and in your gaze, they see the same steely will that was your father's. The army unanimously proclaims you commander-in-chief, and the Carthaginian Senate, gritting its teeth in fear of your popularity, is forced to confirm it. But you understand, this is only a prelude. The real threat lies in Rome. The Roman Republic watches your rise with alarm. They forge an alliance with the Spanish city of Saguntum, which lies within your sphere of influence. This is a provocation. Rome challenges you, testing whether you will retreat. Then your response becomes the beginning of a catastrophe for the ancient world. You give the order to lay siege to Saguntum. The siege lasts a grueling 8 months. You yourself are gravely wounded in the thigh while fighting in the front lines, but you do not retreat from the walls. Your army sees their leader spilling blood with them. When Saguntum finally falls, Rome is furious. A Roman embassy arrives in Carthage, delivering an ultimatum: hand you over or face war. Your political enemies in Carthage are horrified, but you have already calculated everything. You know that Rome is strong in its logistics and allies in Italy. Waiting for them to strike in Africa or Spain means dooming yourself to defeat. You make the most daring decision in the history of military strategy. You decide to take the war to their territory. You assemble a massive army of 90,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, and war elephants. You begin a march that will forever etch your name into eternity. The crisis you face at the foot of the Alps has no human face. Your enemy here is nature itself, and nature does not negotiate. As your army approaches the mountains, winter is approaching. Local tribes, bribed with Roman gold, refuse to let you pass, setting ambushes on the narrow paths. Your officers are distraught. No one has ever led a regular army, much less one with war elephants, across these snow-capped peaks. The Roman consuls are confident the mountains will do the work for them. They consider your plan not brilliant, but simply insane. But your calculations are based on psychology. Strike from where no attack is possible. You give the order to begin the climb, and every next step becomes a test of human endurance. The paths are so narrow that one false move sends soldiers into the icy abyss. Horses fall from the cliffs, dragging carts laden with provisions with them. Elephants accustomed to the hot climate suffer from the unbearable cold. The fierce mountaineers hurl enormous boulders at your columns, sowing panic among the mercenary ranks. Your army is on the verge of mutiny from exhaustion and fear. And at this moment, you prove yourself not just a strategist, but an outstanding crisis manager. You march on foot alongside the common legionnaires. When a gigantic landslide blocks the way and it seems the expedition is doomed, you apply your knowledge of chemistry and physics. You order gigantic fires to be lit on the cliffs, and when the stone becomes red hot, you douse it with sour wine. The rock cracks, and your soldiers use pickaxes to carve a new path right through the monolithic rock. The descent into Italy proves even more terrifying than the ascent. The ice underfoot turns the slope into a deadly slide. Of the 90,000 men who set out from Spain, only about 26,000 descended to the plains of Italy and Sicily. You've lost most of your army, half your horses, and almost all your elephants. Your men are like ghosts, exhausted, hungry, frostbitten. But you've achieved the main thing. You found yourself behind enemy lines, and now Italy lies before you, unaware of the horror that has descended from the mountains. A new crisis befalls you in December. You're in enemy territory. Your army still needs rest, but a fresh, well-armed Roman army under the consul Sempronius Longus is already advancing towards you. The Romans are eager to crush your small force and end the war before spring. If you accept battle on their terms, it will be the end. But you're a master of psychological manipulation. You study your enemy's character. You know Sempronius is ambitious, hot-blooded, and desperate to achieve glory as the conqueror of Hannibal before his consular term ends, and you decide to use his pride against him. You set up camp near the Trebia River. One night in freezing rain and snow, you send your younger brother Mago with 2,000 of the hardiest, most select warriors into ambush. They hide in a ravine overgrown with brush, lying for hours in the icy mud, not making a sound. Your main army, meanwhile, eats a hearty breakfast by the fires, liberally rubbing their bodies with olive oil to keep their bodies warm and their muscles supple. You prepare your men while the enemy sleeps. Early in the morning, you send the Numidian light cavalry straight to the Roman camp. They pelt the sentries with javelins and begin a feigned retreat. The Sempronius Longus is furious. Without giving his legionaries order or warmth, he raises the alarm and sends them in pursuit. Hungry, half-dressed, the Romans are forced to cross the Trebia River, the water up to their chests. By the time they reach your bank, they are chilled to the bone. Their frozen arms can barely hold their heavy shields and swords. At that moment, your well-fed, warmed infantry strikes. A fierce battle ensues. Roman discipline still holds the line, but suddenly from behind the enemy, a detachment of Mahago strikes from behind. The perfect trap snaps shut. The Roman army is caught in a pincer movement. Panic and chaos ensues. Thousands of legionaries die not by swords, but drown in the icy river while trying to flee. You win your first brilliant victory in Italy, proving to Rome that their straightforward force is powerless against your intellect. The crisis of this chapter is a test of your body and your ability to think several steps ahead. The year is 217 BC. Rome sends new legions against you, led by Consul Gaius Flaminius. To outflank his positions and strike at the very heart of Italy, you decide to lead your army through the deadly swamps of the River Armis. This march lasts 4 days and 3 nights. Your men are waist-deep in fetid mud. They have nowhere to sit. They sleep standing, leaning on their packs and the corpses of dead animals. The sanitary conditions are appalling. In these swamps, you contract a severe infection. Your right eye becomes inflamed, causing excruciating pain. You lose it forever. But even half-blind, consumed by fever, you continue to lead the army. Your mind remains crystal clear. Having emerged from the swamps, you begin to demonstratively ravage the lands in order to unsettle Flamios. And it works. The consul gives chase, ignoring reconnaissance. You lead him to the northern shore of Lake Trosman. The place is the perfect natural trap, a narrow road between a deep lake and steep fox-covered hills. At night, you position your troops on the slopes, ordering absolute deathly silence. No fires. Morning breaks. A thick, milky fog rises from the lake, obscuring the hills. The Roman army enters the narrow pass in column. Flaminius can't see more than a few meters. He's sure you're retreating somewhere ahead. And then, when the Roman vanguard encounters your heavy infantry, you give the signal. The roar of corpses echoes from the hills. From the fog, like ghosts, your cavalry and Celtic allies descend on the outstretched Roman flank. The Romans have no time to form up for battle. They don't see the enemy until they're right up close. This isn't a battle. This is methodical annihilation. Thousands of legionaries are driven back to the lake and drown under the weight of their armor. You've destroyed an entire consular army in a single foggy morning. Rome begins to comprehend the scale of the disaster. In 216 BC, a moment of absolute crisis arrives, one that will decide the fate of the entire war. The Roman Republic, driven to despair by your victories, assembles an army the likes of which the world has never seen. 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. 2 consuls stand at their head. Their plan is simple: crush you with colossal, overwhelming force. You have half as many infantry. By all the rules of military art, you must be destroyed. You meet at Cannae, on flat, open ground where there is no possibility of ambush. Your officers anxiously gaze at the horizon where a sea of Roman shields glitters. The tension is so great that the air seems thick. But it is here, under the enemy's complete numerical superiority, that your tactical genius reaches its apogee. You decide to break all conceivable patterns. You arrange your infantry not in a straight line, but in a crescent, curved towards the Romans. You place the Gallic Iberian mercenaries, the most unreliable fighters, at the very center, spearheading the attack, while on the flanks, slightly behind, you position your invincible African veterans in heavy armor. The battle begins. A gigantic Roman steamroller roars into your center. As you planned, the Gaulish Iberians begin a slow retreat. The Romans taste victory. They press forward, their ranks close ever tighter. They rush into the resulting depression, turning into an unruly mob. They don't realize that your retreating center is the spring of a trap. When the Romans are pulled in deep enough, you give the order. Your heavy African infantry stationed on the flanks makes a synchronized turn and strikes the Romans from the sides. At the same time, your cavalry, having routed the Roman horsemen, returns and strikes from the rear. Total encirclement. 80,000 thousands of Romans are trapped in a tiny patch of land. They are so cramped that they can't even lift their swords. The most terrible massacre in ancient history begins. Thousands die in the crush, unwounded. You destroy tens of thousands of people in a single day. You reduce the most powerful army in the world to dust using nothing but geometry and psychology. The crisis of this chapter is the most terrible of all, because it occurs not on the battlefield but in your mind. After the Canaan, you are on top of the world. The road to Rome is open, but you make a decision that historians will debate for millennia. You do not storm the capital. You understand that your army is depleted, you have no siege engines, and Rome is a fortress with 1 million inhabitants. Your plan is to force Rome's allies in Italy to betray the Republic and isolate the enemy. But Rome learns from its disasters. They change strategy. Fabi Maximus, nicknamed the Slow, comes to power. The Romans no longer accept open battle. They begin a war of attrition. They follow you like a shadow, destroying forage, burning fields, intercepting your supply routes. In years pass, you remain undefeated in Italy, but you are trapped there. The Carthaginian Senate, steeped in corruption and fear of your power, refuses to send reinforcements. You are abandoned by your own homeland. Your only hope is your brother Hasdrubal, who fights his way to you with a new army from Spain. He repeats your feat and crosses the Alps. If your armies unite, Rome will fall forever. But one night, this fragile house of cards of hope collapses. A Roman detachment gallops into your camp. They do not attack. With wild cackles, they throw a bloody sack over the fence and disappear into the darkness. You approach, you untie the rough ropes, and your brother Hasdrubal stares at you with glassy eyes from the sack. The Roman legions intercepted his army at the Minotaurus River and destroyed it. You take this head in your hands, and in the heavy silence of the night, you realize a terrible, merciless truth. You have never lost a battle, but you have just lost this war. The Roman state machine has proven too vast to be destroyed by a single genius. Your campaign in Italy is doomed. You return to Africa, and here on the sun-baked plains of prizes, you come face to face with your greatest nightmare. Scipio is not the foolish consuls you crushed in Italy. He is young, smart, and ambitious. But the worst thing is, he learned war from you. He carefully studied all your tactics. He is your mirror image. Before the battle, you meet in no man's land. The two greatest predators of antiquity stare each other down. You offer peace, recognizing the weakness of your hastily assembled army. But Scipio refuses. He desires only absolute victory. The battle begins. You gamble on a massive charge of 80 war elephants. You expect them to break through the Roman line. But Scipio is ready. He arranges the legions not in a checkerboard formation, but in columns, leaving wide corridors between them. When the elephants charge, the Romans don't greet them with a count. They part, and simultaneously hundreds of trumpeters begin to emit a deafening, piercing roar. The elephants go mad from this sonic terror. They become frightened, turn, and in blind panic rush straight for your own flanks, crushing your cavalry. The Roman cavalry immediately takes advantage of this chaos and drives your horsemen from the battlefield. Only the infantry remains in the center. A brutal, viscous battle begins between your Italian veterans and the Roman legions. It seems your genius can once again turn the tide of history. But suddenly, as if by a twist of fate, the Roman cavalry returns, stabbing you in the back, just as you did at Cinnaesis. Your army is destroyed. You narrowly escape. The great Carthaginian Empire falls to its knees, and your altar oath shatters on the sands of the fortress. Your next crisis is survival in a peace that you fear more than any war. The war is over. Carthage has capitulated. But you do not give in. Elected to the highest office of Suffet, you begin a brilliant economic reform. You root out corruption, force the oligarchs to pay taxes, and within a few years restore the economy of the ruined country so quickly that Rome is horrified. They understand that as long as you live, Carthage will always be a threat. The Roman Senate demands your extradition, and the very Carthaginian elites whose thefts you stopped are eager to hand you over to the enemy. Betrayal of your own homeland burns more painfully than Roman swords. Under cover of night, you flee your home. The one whose name made mighty legions tremble now stalks secret paths to the coast. You become the most famous and most dangerous political refugee of the ancient world. Your long, grueling odyssey through the courts of the Indian rulers begins. You come to King Antiochus the Great in Syria. You propose a grandiose plan to land in Italy and stab Rome in the back. But the effete, narcissistic Eastern monarchs are unable to comprehend the scale of your strategic genius. They want to use your legendary name as a trophy, but are afraid to give you real power. They lose their battles to Rome, ignoring your advice. Wherever you go, Roman spies and diplomats follow you. Your life devolves into constant paranoia. You are forced to build houses with numerous secret exits. The great commander turns into a hunted wolf. The Roman Republic, spreading its tentacles across the continent, cannot sleep peacefully while your heart continues to beat. The world becomes too small for you and for Rome. Your final crisis comes in 183 BC. You are already 64 years old. You find refuge in Bithynia with King Prusius. But Roman diplomacy is ruthless. Titus Quinctius Flamininus arrives in Bithynia with a single mission: to take you alive. They plan to parade you in chains through the streets of Rome during a triumph, and then strangle you in a dank prison cell to put an end to a main historical complex. The local king, fearing the wrath of the Republic, betrays you. Your small villa on the shores of the Sea of Marmara is suddenly surrounded. You hear the heavy footsteps of Roman soldiers. You check the secret underground passages you built especially for such an occasion, but they are blocked by Bithynian guards. The trap is sprung. There is nowhere left to run. There are no more armies, no more allies. And at that moment, there is not a drop of panic in you. You accept your fate with the icy calm of a true stoic. You sit down in a chair. You listen as Roman soldiers begin to break down the front doors. You slowly remove your massive ring from your finger. Within this ring is a capsule of deadly poison which you have carried with you for many years, knowing that this day would surely come. You grin, looking at the closed door behind which your enemies crowd. Let us finally lift this heavy burden from the shoulders of the Romans. You utter your final words. Since they consider it too long to wait for the death of one old man, you drink the poison. When the Roman legionaries, anticipating the greatest prize of their lives, burst into the room, they freeze on the threshold in impotent rage. They are too late. You sit in a chair with your eyes closed, majestic and completely free. You did not allow them to revel in your humiliation. You left undefeated. Your oath, given to your father decades ago, is fulfilled to the end. Done. They took your life, but you took their peace forever, remaining in history as the most brilliant and terrible enemy Rome has ever known.